Hey everyone, this is the conclusion by way of an epilogue. Uh, Knei-Paz's The Social and Political Thought of Leon Trotsky. It starts with a quote, "But the misfortunes which have overwhelmed living people, the fire and bloodshed of the Civil War, do the consequences of a revolution justify in general the sacrifices it involves? The question is teleological and therefore fruitless. It would be as well to ask, in face of the difficulties and griefs of personal existence, is it worth while to be born?" End quote. Trotsky, The History of the Russian Revolution, Book 3. It is not difficult to see why the notion of birth should have suggested itself to Trotsky, above and elsewhere, as a metaphor for revolution. After all, the view that revolution signified the beginning of a new life was as old as the idea itself of revolution, and a basic component of its morphology. But neither the facile transformation of metaphor into analogy, nor Trotsky's characteristic flourish for aphorism, will blind the careful reader to the logical fallacy in the words which make up the above epigraph. Whence the source of the fallacy? The temptations of style, of the graceful phrase, the epigrammatic idea, to which, as a critic of his once asserted, Trotsky was often prone and sometimes succumbed, are surely a secondary factor here, if at all. Footnote: see James Burnham's Science and Style. In Trotsky, in defense of Marxism especially, where Burnham accused Trotsky of using style instead of logic as, quote, proof for his claims. End footnote. Rather, the failure to distinguish between the chance of birth and the choice of revolution, between an existential phenomenon and one which is self-imposed, between, on the one hand, the telos, or purpose of life in general, and, on the other, the aims or objectives of political action, must be attributed to that virtually inherent element of determinism which so consistently characterized Trotsky's attitude to the Russian Revolution. As we remarked at the close of the last chapter, this determinism went hand in hand with a belief in reason and in progress, and with a fundamentally optimistic frame of mind. Not for Trotsky the agonies of inevitability. Quote, "But if it's all random, then what's the point?" End quote, asks a character in a modern English novel, and is left perplexed and tormented when he hears the reply, quote, "What's the point if it's all inevitable?" End quote. Footnote: the exchange occurs in Tom Stoppard's Lord Malquist and Mr. Moon, London, 1974. The description for Lord Malquist and Mr. Moon by Tom Stoppard says, Tom Stoppard's first novel, originally published in 1966 just before the premiere of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, is an uproarious fantasy set in modern London. The cast includes a penniless, dandified Malquist with a liveried coach, Malquist Boswellian biographer Moon, who frantically scribbles as a bomb ticks in his pocket, a couple of cowboys, one being named Jasper Jones, a lion who's banned from the Ritz, an Irishman on a donkey claiming to be the risen Christ, and 3 irresistible women. End footnote. Or back to the text, end footnote. As against this, Trotsky would have little difficulty, and much satisfaction in making, to the extent of belaboring and savoring the point. So complete, in fact, was Trotsky's sedulous commitment to October 1917 that not even the horrors of Stalinism, which Trotsky himself did so much and so early to expose, could unhinge Trotsky's loyalty to the events and aftermath of that famous month, and to the ideas that went into that month's making. Doubts seldom arose in Trotsky's mind about the ultimate value of what was introduced into history by the Russian Revolution. In this sense, Trotsky always remained true to his youth. One is reminded, by comparison, of the, quote, father of Russian Marxism, Georgy Plekhanov, who, in 1918, on his deathbed, tormented by what had happened in Russia and by a sense of his own historical complicity in it, repeatedly turned to a friend from early revolutionary days with the melancholy question, quote, did we not begin the propaganda of Marxism too early in backward semi-Asiatic Russia? End quote. Footnote. Baron Plekhanov. The friend was Lev Deutsch, one of the founders with Plekhanov of the Emancipation of Labor group. The description for Plekhanov, the father of Russian Marxism, by Samuel H. Baron, published in 1965, says, this is the first biography in a Western language of G.V. Plekhanov, the man who almost single-handedly launched the movement that was to culminate in the Bolshevik Revolution. The study of Plekhanov's life, which spanned the eventful period of Russia's history from the Crimean War through the Bolshevik upheaval, illuminates the origins and vicissitudes of Russian Marxism. After a brief career as an active revolutionary populist, Plekhanov fled to Switzerland, where he embarked on a systematic study of Marxist theory. In two books published during the 1880s, he laid the theoretical basis of Russian Marxism. For 2 decades, this Russian social democratic movement centered around Plekhanov, and almost all of its leading personalities, including Lenin, began as Plekhanov's disciples. Plekhanov's main theoretical concept, the two-stage revolutionary scheme, was largely discredited by the Revolution of 1905 and the breakup of the Second International, and the Bolshevik Revolution sealed the fate of Plekhanov's orthodox Marxian theory. Plekhanov died in Finland, an embittered fugitive from the Bolshevik regime. Plekhanov was one of the most cultured men of his time, as well as one of the most sensitive and creative of Marx's disciples. Plekhanov inaugurated Marxian literary criticism and pioneered the extension of Marxian research into a number of other fields. A long chapter in the book provides an introduction to Plekhanov's stimulating studies in philosophy, art, and history. Back to the text and footnote. No guilty conscience accompanied Trotsky to Trotsky's grave, and insofar as such a question as Plekhanov's ever arose for Trotsky, it was only because others had posed it, and Trotsky felt it his duty to declare it to be meaningless, to denounce it as, quote, fruitless. Yet not even Trotsky could remain insensitive to the fact that the culmination of the Russian Revolution in Stalinism required, at the very least, a theoretical rethinking and reformulation of the relationship between backwardness and socialism. His attempts in this direction, since they remained anchored to the contingent and unscientific concept of, quote, betrayal, only show up the very limited character of the revision Trotsky was prepared to contemplate. At any rate, Trotsky proved unable to account for the phenomenon whereby the domination of society by politics or the state and the autonomy of the latter assumed a permanent, not, quote, crisis character. And it must be said again that Trotsky himself, while in power, saw no alternative in principle, though certainly in degree, to this, quote, revolution from above. even if in Trotsky's case the appeal to, quote, crisis may have constituted a more genuine pretext for what Trotsky then envisaged as merely temporary measures. Moreover, the assumptions and preconceptions of Trotsky's own theory of the Russian Revolution unwittingly committed Trotsky to the view that the state must play a commanding role in the transformation of a backward society, though the end result might have little to do with socialism as such. In the course of this study, we have often noted this ironic relationship between ideas and events, and, in particular, the manner in which the theory of the permanent revolution was finally confronted by the realities of history. This theme was anticipated in the introduction to the present work, and, one hopes, established in the course of it. The reader who has followed us this far will not require a recapitulation or even the main elements of Trotsky's thought, nor of its critique, in order to appreciate this theme. To summarize is, in any case, to trivialize. Footnote: the present author, eschewing a summary of Trotsky's ideas here, has nevertheless succumbed to its temptations elsewhere. See Baruch Knei-Paz, Trotsky, Marxism, and the Revolution of Backwardness in Shlomo Avineri's The Varieties of Marxism, published 1977. One second. Sorry, I can't find a description of the Varieties of Marxism book, but I have it. But I don't have a description for it. Anyway, end footnote. There is, however, a further theme which bears restating, for it provides the historical perspective within which the significance of Trotsky's thought may be grasped. It is now commonplace to observe that the meaning and significance of Marxism have been radically transformed since the First World War. If it originally rose in the West as a critique, even a death knell of one modern industrial society, Marxism finally set in the East. Paradox, though it may be in more ways than one, as the harbinger of another modern society. This much is clear about the changing role of Marxism and need not be belabored. It does need to be stressed, however, that while no one can any longer pretend that there is, or ever will be, a correspondence between the society created in, for example, the Soviet Union and that dreamt of in the ancient Marxist text, the former does represent something unprecedented until the aftermath of 1917. A unique form, in fact, of collectivism which, in the meantime, has been reproduced, mutatis mutandis, in other backward societies. Trotsky's theory of the permanent revolution serves to throw light systematically, though hardly unerringly, upon this phenomenon. This is not to deny the earlier point about the limitations of the theory or the manner in which it is misconstrued the possibilities of backwardness. It is, however, to claim that Trotsky's analysis of the conditions of backwardness, of the character of the modern revolution, of the concept of, quote, combined development, and of the relation of all this to a socialist movement, if not to the socialist society, established, at the very least, a heuristic model, and provided a theoretical paradigm of what we have in this study called the, quote, revolution of backwardness, and what has emerged in this century as the characteristic revolution of our times. Footnote: Trotsky's, quote, law of combined development has been acknowledged by some anthropologists of the evolutionary persuasion as the first scientific attempt to postulate the potentialities of evolution of backward societies. See Marshall D. Solins, Elman R. Service's edited volume, Creation and Culture. Ann Arbor, 1960. Yeah, looking for a description of this book. Here we are. Evolution and Culture, the edited volume by Marshall D. Solins and Elman R. Service and Thomas G. Harding. This seminal work, originally published by the University of Michigan Press, explores the profound and complex relationship between evolutionary theory and cultural anthropology, edited by renowned anthropologist Marshall D. Solins and Elman R. Service. Evolution and Culture delves into the dynamics of cultural evolution, challenging the mid-20th century rejection of evolutionism in anthropology. With contributions from Thomas G. Harding, David Kaplan, and a foreword by Leslie A. White, Evolution and Culture critically examines the distinction between specific and general evolution, offering a comprehensive analysis of how cultures adapt and progress over time. Evolution and Culture addresses key concepts such as adaptation, cultural dominance, and evolutionary potential, providing a rich theoretical framework for understanding cultural change. The authors argue for the inevitability of cultural evolution, drawing parallels between biological and cultural systems as thermodynamic entities. The essays collectively highlight the interplay between environmental pressures and cultural adaptations, emphasizing the role of technological and social innovations in driving cultural evolution. Published as part of the Leopold Classic Library series, this edition maintains the rigorous quality control. Blah, blah, blah. That's just some bullshit about the book. I like the print book. Okay, so back to the text and footnote. This revolution was partly the consequence of the impact of the West, during a particular historical juncture, upon backward societies, but the form it took put an end to expectations of a historical convergence between East and West. Marx's assumptions that the, quote, country that is more developed, shows to the less developed the image of its own future, end quote, was proved to be erroneous and perhaps a typical example of European egocentrism. Trotsky may be said to have been the first Marxist to have perceived this error, though it was Lenin and Bolshevism, the latter itself a reflection of the different revolutionary possibilities of East and West, which confirmed his prognosis in reality. It may well be, therefore, that Trotsky's main importance as a thinker lies precisely in Trotsky having postulated the impossibility of a universal history in the 20th century. This, too, however, is an irony, perhaps the greatest irony of all, for while Trotsky's intellectual insights all pointed in this direction, in the direction, that is, of a parting of the ways between East and West, Trotsky himself remained ill at ease with and unreconciled to this prospect, as Trotsky's insistence on, quote, world revolution, even when this came to verge on fantasy, bears witness. To put the matter somewhat differently, the Trotsky who ultimately refuted the existence of one historical crucible, who was a theorist of the, quote, revolution of backwardness, a revolution belonging to a genus having no precise counterpart in, or affiliation with, the Western tradition, was also consumed by a faith originating in that very tradition, to wit, a faith in the last universal revolution and in the socialist millennium. Footnote. It is this latter aspect of Trotsky which has dominated the popular view of Trotsky and which has been stressed and encouraged by, amongst others, Deutscher. It explains perhaps the cult status which Trotsky has often enjoyed in Western radical circles. End footnote. That revolution, like the millennium of which that revolution was to be the harbinger, proved to be an illusion, of course. Not to belabor the point, nor to savor the point, but merely to make it, let us leave the last word to a character in the at once phantasmagoric and realistic anti-utopian novel We by Yevgeny Zemyatin. Himself once a Bolshevik and later a refugee from Stalin's Russia. Footnote. Zemyatin had been a Bolshevik in his youth but left the party before 1917. Following the revolution, he had a great influence upon the literary group known as the Serapion Fraternity, a group, incidentally, which Trotsky had discussed in his Literature and Revolution. We was written in 1920, but We's publication in Soviet Russia was banned. In 1931, unable to publish anything, Zemyatin requested and received permission from Stalin to leave the country. All right. End footnote. Just real quick review of We. We is a dystopian novel by Russian writer Yevgeny Zemyatin, written in 1920-21. We was first published as an English translation by Gregory Zilberg in 1924 by E.P. Dutton in New York, with the original Russian text first published in 1952. We describes a world of harmony and conformity within a united totalitarian state. We influenced the emergence of dystopia as a literary genre. George Orwell said that Aldous Huxley's 1931 Brave New World must be partly derived from We, although Huxley denied this. Orwell's own 1984 was also inspired by We. And Wikipedia says, the Serapion brothers was a group of writers formed in Petrograd, Russia in 1921. The group was named after a literary group, the Serapion Brethren, to which German Romantic author E.T.A. Hoffmann belonged, and after which E.T.A. Hoffmann named E.T.A. Hoffmann's collection of tales. The Serapion brothers' members included Nikolai Tikhonov, Veniamin Kavarin, Mikhail Zoshchenko, Viktor Shklovsky, Vsevolod Ivanov, Elizaveta Polanskaya, Ilya Gruzdez, Mikhail Slonimsky, Lev Luntz, Vladimir Posner, Nikolay Nikitin, and Konstantin Fedin. The group formed during their studies at the seminars of Yuri Tinyanov, Yevgeny Zemyatin, whose 1922 essay, The Serapion Brethren, gives insight into the early style of several members, and Korny Chukovsky and the Petrograd House of Arts. The group was officially organized at its first meeting on the 1st of February 1921, and, quote, as long as the Serapion brothers' headquarters remained in the House of Arts, met regularly every Saturday, end quote. The Serapion brothers eventually split. Some of them moved to Moscow and became official Soviet writers, while others, like Zoshchenko, remained in Leningrad, or emigrated from Soviet Russia. Angor Ulanov wrote, quote, "The Serapion brothers did not found a literary school. In fact, as it appears from the Serapion, quote, manifesto, and from Fedon's words, the Brotherhood did not even intend to found one," end quote. So back to the end footnote, back to the text. The narrator in We is in the midst of a conversation with a companion when the latter suggests acting against, quote, the one state, end quote. And this is from the book. I sprang up. This is unthinkable. This is preposterous. Is it possible you can't see clearly that what you're stirring up is a revolution? Yes, revolution. But why is that preposterous? It's preposterous because there can't be any revolution, because our revolution was the last, and there can't be any other revolutions. Everybody knows that. Dear man, you're a mathematician. Even more, you're a philosopher, because of your mathematics. Well then, name the ultimate number for me, the ultimate, the supreme, the greatest number of all. Come, that's preposterous. Since the number of numbers is infinite, what number would you want to be the ultimate number? Well, and what revolution would you want to be the ultimate one? There is no ultimate revolution. Revolutions are infinite in number. And that's the end of the quote passage from the book of We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. That's the end of the conclusion. Thank you so much for listening.